Okay, today is February 23rd, 2021, and I am here on Zoom with Mark and Gilah Abelson, and we are doing this interview for the Congregation Beth Jacob Oral History Project. So,
Good, we're in
you
the right place.
start.
Right time.
Can you start by telling your names and the names of people in your family?
Sure. I'm Gilah Abelson.
I'm Mark. We have three sons, all of whom were actually bar mitzvahed at the synagogue. Jeremy, who is now 40, almost 41. Joel is 38, and Noah today is 35.
Oh, today.
And each of them is married. So we have daughters-in-law Mia and Lauren and Liza. And we have from them 8 grandchildren.
Wonderful.
And I think we're also very fortunate. Both of us still have our moms alive. My mom is 91 and Mark's mom is 97. Oh, almost going to be 97 next week. Next week.
Wow, that's great. And do you remember when you joined the synagogue?
We each remember, but we remember different exact dates. The synagogue suffered a devastating fire in 1979. We at the time lived on Washington, which is the street that leads into the Alameda, right at the front of the north part of the synagogue. I believe we joined right before the fire, a couple of months before the fire. And there was a woman by the name of Judy Rose who was a membership person, and she was hounding us quite effectively. And we joined a few months before the fire. Version B?
So I remember we lived maybe 5 houses into Washington from the Alameda, and coming home and seeing the flames from the synagogue, and running down there, and there were already members of the synagogue there, maybe Marty Bergman, Henry Rabin, Joe Ackman, people, and I remember gathering with the congregation the next day on the grounds, and I think we joined shortly after that. Jeremy wasn't born yet. He was born in May of 1980, and I think instead of waiting till he was born, we joined after. But I also that's a controversy. But I, as a teenager, belonged to Beth Jacob. My family had moved from the Los Angeles area to San Carlos, and in 1966, and I was there for my 10th grade year, and I was in USY, and in confirmation with Rabbi Teitelbaum and Cantor Cohen. So that's when I first fell in love with, it was then TBJ, Temple Beth Jacob.
Wow, interesting. What else do you remember about the fire and its aftermath?
The synagogue president at the time was Norm Stone, and even though whether or not we were members, we still knew some of the people of the adult age, so to speak, and there was a lot of wringing of the hands, which lasted for a long period of time, but the congregation really got to work very quickly about rebuilding. And I remember being on like two committees, the construction rebuilding, and I was on something else. And I think the majority of people really jumped in to do what they could. And I also remember that one of the churches, the one on Roosevelt or Jefferson,
Peninsula Covenant Church,
immediately opened their doors to us to allow us to have our services there. And, an event like that really brought the community together.
Yeah, I remember, I think Norm Stone personally called every single person in the synagogue, if not met with every person, asking for any kind of help that they could give, financially or bodily or however. And it was a massive effort. And I think he was so positive, and I just remember, there was no doubt that we would rebuild. And then going to the church, I remember that Rabbi Talmud used to have the anniversary Shabbatot, where everyone got a rose and they celebrated the anniversaries. Let's say it was, we were married in September, so it would be September, October, November would be together. And I remember we were at the Peninsula Covenant Church. They had the cross covered on the sheet, but it was such a good feeling that the community really reached out like that, and we were able to carry on.
So when you joined, well, you already had a connection because your family, you were as a young person, part of Beth Jacob. But what do you think influenced you to join as a new family, as adults?
There was a camp that Gilah had worked at that was called Camp Arazim, an overnight camp that was like Camp Vermont for Northern California. And although I hadn't worked there, I was involved with the organization. And Rabbi Teitelbaum was one of the kind of the founders of the camp. And there were a lot of families who were members of either Beth Jacob or Kol Emeth, who had been kind of the backbone of the camp. And as a result of that, we both knew people at Beth Jacob. We both grew up in conservative synagogues, and I think we always assumed that we would join a conservative synagogue. And we weren't going to wait until, we had somebody ready to go to a religious school. We wanted to belong to a synagogue. So it was kind of, and we moved to this house, and it was just a natural marriage, so to speak, for us and the synagogue.
Yeah, we got to walk outside on Yom Kippur and walk right to the doors. It took us about 2 minutes. So, yeah, it was very comfortable there. I forgot about it at Camp Arazim contact. That comes later in the story, but Rabbi Teitelbaum was really very instrumental in the camp and kind of drew us there. So.
When I had a very close friend who grew up at that synagogue, and his mother hosted me while I was in law school each year for the high holidays. And she was in the circle of friends, some of the people whose kids had gone to Arazim, and she was a close friend of Rabbi Teitelbaum, and so I got to know some of those folks as well.
Okay. And how were you welcomed into the community?
Uh, it felt, I don't remember exactly, but I know it was always comfortable. Everybody was so kind and um, accepting. What was that woman's name who was the executive? It was Bertie?
Yeah, Bertie Zelver.
Bertie Zelver. Oh gosh, she was a character in the front office, and yeah, it used to be fun to come, to see her. I think everybody was just embracing, and it's always been a place that is like seems without judgment. There's not a there's no caste system at our synagogue. There's no hierarchy with intellect or hierarchy with money. It always felt very comfortable.
And it's funny, I have this image. We had moved into our house and we had redone the kitchen, and our phone was in the kitchen, was on the wall. And for those people who didn't own phones then, it was not only rotary, but it didn't have a screen saying who was calling. And when the phone rang, you just answered it. You didn't, screen your calls or anything. And this very nice woman, Judy Rose, would call weekly. Have you made up your mind? Blah, 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 blah. And, I wanted to join a little earlier than, we probably would have, just so I would stop getting telephone calls from Judy Rose. And I have this vision of, the phone ringing, me picking it up, thinking, it was a friend or one of our family members, and it was Judy Rose again.
It's so funny, I don't remember.
So she later
Not you
became
all
a
the
good friend.
time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good story. So,
Yeah.
this is very broad, but in a general way, what role has CBJ played in your life?
It is a broad question. You want to go first?
Do you have something? You can go.
I think it really provided a community for us. Our kids also went to then it was called the North Peninsula Jewish Community Day School. It's now called the Warnick School. So that was a big community for us. But Bet Jacob also was a community for us. And, we made a lot of friends. Our kids made friends. There's so many bar and bat mitzvahs that we attended. And I think that we enjoyed the holiday, being present at holidays. So it was kind of an anchor in our lives.
Yeah, that's funny that you said that. The word I was thinking of was anchor. It was an anchor because our immediate family, it was all in Southern California, is all in Southern California. Since then, I have a couple cousins who have moved up here, but then we were the only ones in the family. And we did probably more than most people. We were lucky. We went to LA for many holidays and many occasions. So in that way, we weren't at CBJ for Pesach or for Rosh Hashanah. We always were for Yom Kippur. So we didn't have that connection, but it was a place of, again, I'm back to that word acceptance, and I find a lot of peacefulness. This doesn't work for Mark, but I find a lot of peacefulness being in services, and it was just like a break from the secular life that we both also have a very rich work life, but this was a little oasis anchor for us.
Can you describe some of the milestones that you've experienced at CBJ, personal family milestones, or it can also relate to broader events.
Should I close it?
Yeah, I don't know which one.
I'm sorry, and I'm gonna close the window because next door, no, the wind, no, I, do you mind this? We're getting prisms. It's from our, we're getting like rainbows. I like it. Is it okay?
It's beautiful.
Okay, I'm gonna just close the window because next, we didn't have any gardeners or anything, but they're redoing their backyard all of a sudden.
So milestones, I mean, certainly each one of the bar mitzvahs was a major milestone. And I think another major milestone, at least for me, was we have known Nat Ezra long before he became the rabbi at our synagogue. And his arrival and the fact that he remains the rabbi now, I don't know, 20 years later, something like that. That has been a major milestone for me. His arrival and his continuation. He's a fantastic leader, a great spirit. I mean, everything about him is positive. Everything about him is about community, and he's brought so much to the synagogue, and we continue to grow, etc. So that having him there has been a major benefit to me personally, and to our kids.
I don't know if that's a milestone, but he is a milestone to us. Yes, of course, the B'nai Mitzvah. So Rabbi Teitelbaum was and Cantor Cohen were there for Jeremy's bar mitzvah in '93, and something that I think that Rabbi Teitelbaum said we still talk about today. He said to Jeremy, who tended to be kind of very extroverted and out there, and he said, you don't have to stand out to be outstanding. And that has stayed with Jeremy and with us since that time. And then for Joel, it was still Cantor Cohen, and it was one of Rabbi Ezra's first B'nai Mitzvah. So really he's been, because Joel's 38, so Rabbi Ezra's been 25 years with our synagogue. And and I remember Joel had the longest maftir, Pekude Vayakel, or Vayakel Pekude was his parsha, and he had the longest maftir, and it was Cantor. No, that was Noah. I know. I'll tell you why I know it was. Yeah, Mark was thinking it was a different Cantor, but I think he was with us for Noah's. That was a big achievement for Joel, and he really wanted to do it, and Rabbi Ezra was very encouraging, and he picked out a little part about Shabbat, which at our family, Shabbat, especially Erev Shabbat, was always very special. So that permeated his discussion, his interpretation of his parsha. And then Noah, also Rabbi Ezra, but then Cantor Gluck, who was with us, Jamie Gluck, maybe 2 years, 3 years with the synagogue. And Noah's bar mitzvah was unlike any other. First, he was very, very nervous. He was a very sensitive child and very, very nervous. And Rabbi Ezra said, yes, I think you might be the most nervous person most nervous bar mitzvah I've ever had, but he got through it. And then and he was the one who brought Knut Dybie, the rescuer, to for his bar mitzvah, because Noah wanted to honor a righteous amongst the nations. And the man that he talked about was still alive, Alexander Roslin, but he couldn't travel. So Knut came and he became a lifelong friend. And that he did the sermon in place of Rabbi Ezra, and he got a standing ovation for about 10 minutes. And so that was quite a milestone. And then since that time, Rabbi Ezra, we brought him back, and when Knut was given, finally Yad Vashem honored him, aside from all the other Danes, then Rabbi Ezra was instrumental with us in making commemorating it and having a whole service in his honor. And I remember this Danish Jew showing up from someplace, and you were at that, right? Yeah, I think you were. And he came and he said, I heard you were going to speak. And so he had an aliyah, and it was amazing. So that was quite a bar mitzvah. It's, of course, you can remember other things, but it seems like those stick out the most as far as milestones. And the coming of Rabbi Ezra, because Rabbi Ezra was my camper at Camp Arazim. He was an Ada Aleph, and I was his Rosh Edah. That means the head of his unit, because he was in the younger kids. And I was probably 10 years older than him, but then he was a little boy. And then we knew him as our kids went to camp. He became active in the camp. He was the camp director. But then welcoming him to the synagogue was a major, I think, milestone for our synagogue and for us, because he's very, very dear to us. And I think the one thing that stands out about him is he's a brilliant teacher. I love learning from him. And he's one rabbi without an ego in the world. He's amazing. So I know that's not so PC to say, but
said it.
I said it.
Yep.
Did you have anything to do with bringing Rabbi Ezra, or it just happened that he came and you knew him?
Yeah. Well, when Rabbi Teitelbaum announced he was going to retire, Nat was living in Boston. He was at a conservative synagogue in Boston as like an associate or junior rabbi. And he and his now wife Mimi had started up their relationship. She was living here, he was living there. And Nat's college roommate was David Arfin, who's a member of our synagogue. And David and his wife Maddie immediately put Nat's name forward, even before Nat did, to the search committee. They contacted us, and we knew a bunch of people on the search committee and spoke highly of Nat and said what a wonderful fit we thought he would be. I wasn't sure if the older members would cotton to a younger rabbi, but they ended up doing that and liking him very much. So we had just kind of urged the people on the selection committee to hire him.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot coming together.
Yeah.
Can you each talk about your involvement in the synagogue over the years? I know you've been very active. Can you talk about in what ways and what you were involved in?
You get to go first.
I get to go first. Well, I think we have been very active. It's hard to, I think my first involvement could have been with wasn't really preschool, but it was before preschool. We had like a toddler group. And I know that along with others, I started that group. And Karen Stein ran that group for maybe 2 decades. And so being part of that and learning how, maybe getting my feet wet with fundraising and, and recruitment of teachers and things like that. So that was maybe my first involvement with the synagogue, was with the toddler preschool thing. And I know it was, yeah, Rabbi Ezra was still there. There's pictures of him coming at Shabbat and being with our kids. So that was maybe the first thing I did. And we've been very active in the synagogue, but I guess my biggest leadership besides that was with Rock and Shabbat. And I've been, from the very beginning when Rabbi Ezra had the idea of a kind of a musical Shabbat, or he thought this might be nice. I remember sitting in his office with Amy Kier, and we kind of came up with the framework for Rock and Shabbat, and including a meal together afterwards. I'm still on that committee. I kind of chaired that committee for over a decade, and now we have wonderful Noreen Summer being on that committee, being the head of that committee. But it was always a source of great joy. Like we would meet and set the tables as a group, and then go to this wonderful Freilach joyful service, and then everybody eat together. And there were times when there were like upwards to 200 people there. That wasn't happening before COVID with those numbers, but it's really been I think the highlight of my involvement for me. I was on the board. I don't think I was the best board member. I think I think that I am a worker bee. Like Mark is like the idea bee, and I think when you're on a board, you have to be the idea bee. But I remember enjoying being, on a board, but I don't know how valuable I was. What else? I don't know. I'll think if I can think of anything else.
You've been a liaison with Yom HaShoah.
Oh, well, yes, and I'm on the North Peninsula Yom HaShoah committee also for 2 decades. And one of my roles on that committee is liaison to CBJ. So it's kind of natural. I interface with Rabbi and Bill, and now Rabbi Alana has been so helpful. That's been a pleasure, and there are there have been and are still lots of survivors at our synagogue. So that's been a special connection also, that we have families with many generations, or several generations that are here, that are survivor families.
Okay, so I've been on the board several times, and
a much more valuable board member than me.
And I've been involved in fundraising almost all the time. Every time there's a a major project. I get involved in the fundraising.
Oh, so I'm just gonna piggyback on
Yeah.
that. The galas, I was on the gala committee for many, many, many years, along with the President for Life, Greg Sterling, and Curtis Leviant, and Rosenberg. Oh my gosh.
Grace.
Well, Grace did, and then the other Rosenberg too, but Grace too, the flower Rosenberg.
Yeah.
Anyway, and the Lehman, Dorsey. Anyway, so we were planning every 2 years, planning the gala for many years. Yes, that was a biggie.
So each time there's been like a building project or something, an attempt to raise money, I've worked on that. And I would say since Rabbi Ezra became the rabbi, I have been kind of like a backroom consultant for him, for Bill. I've negotiated the Nat's contract every time it's been negotiated. And on Bill's contract, I represented the synagogue negotiating that contract. I mean, both things have been very easy to do. And for most of the presidents, I don't take an active role, but I'm there for them. Again, in a less formal way, certainly for Greg and for Steve Dines and for Nat and Bill.
And you also served as president of the board at one point?
No, it's
You've been asked to.
it's not a job that I've wanted. It wouldn't have been a good job for me, especially once Nat became the rabbi. And before then, I was too young. How's that?
What is the thing you did for every gala? For every gala, you solicited not the guys who just like donate.
Yeah.
What's that called?
Well, we had auction items and things.
No, before the
the
auction,
sponsorships.
The sponsorships. You always had that for many years.
Yeah. So the idea for our galas is that you make some money during the evening, and some money on tickets, etc. But that generally covers your expenses. The monies are made with sponsorships. The people who make larger donations and they make it before and they get, tickets, extra tickets or whatever. And so, yeah, I headed up the committee to raise the sponsorship money.
For many years.
Many years, yeah.
So how do you think CBJ has changed over the years, both in terms of maybe certain programs that you remember when you first joined as to later, and also in terms of religious practice or the atmosphere?
It's a great question. I'll take a crack at it first. I think when we first joined, Bet Jacob was a slightly liberal, conservative synagogue. We were kind of mainstream with our ritual and religious practice. Rabbi Teitelbaum was a very active social activist, and he set a very liberal tone politically, but we were pretty much mainstream in terms of conservative synagogues. And I think that we kind of jumped on the bandwagon with other synagogues about giving women great, becoming egalitarian for our services and leadership and participation. Um, and I think we were kind of at the, maybe not the forefront, but we did things, we changed our policies before other conservative synagogues. Both rabbis have had a very pro-Israel engagement, pro-Israel relationship, which is important to us. And we've certainly been part of that, I think. And I would say maybe 15 years ago, it's hard to like give a real good time estimate, but synagogue growth in the Bay Area and actually all over America, especially for conservative synagogues, started to decline. And we made a very aggressive effort to reach out to young families. And I think that has been our best effort as a community, as a synagogue. We've been extremely welcoming to new families, people who are there and not members. I think the synagogue has really changed about that. And actually it's reflected in our architecture and how we use and planned our physical space as well. That it's, you can be there on a Shabbat morning and be out in the lobby and just chat, and it's set up for that. And there's a place for an alternative service, a shorter service, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we've really changed with the times and tried to be very appealing to young families, and I think we've been successful.
Yeah, I would say that when having three very loud, rambunctious boys, I'd say something that has really changed. I think the synagogue has become less rigid and more accepting of all kinds of people. In both in the behavior of like the children. I think there's a great tolerance for the sounds of children in the service, and there wasn't went before. There's also, compared to most synagogues, there's not so many rules of who is Jewish and who can be part of the synagogue. And I think that's a lot because of Rabbi Ezra and Bill and Cantor Barbara, just their openness to things. I know that there's a family of people who are descendants of, what's that called, conservos, people that were hidden in Spain. And I heard, I just can't even believe it, that no synagogue, even Reform synagogue, accepted them as part of their congregation until they came to our synagogue. And there's just no question they would be accepted here. And I know that Rabbi Ezra, actually before any conservative rabbi, I think he got around it by having somebody else say the final words, but he officiated at a gay marriage before conservative rabbis were allowed to. And he was right there and doing it. And I think maybe a Reform rabbi said those words that that make you married, but he definitely was part of it and believed in, it's just been very open and accepting of everything. And as Mark said, we have just made it a place that everybody can find something that they that speaks to them. It's just been, and education. Though Rabbi Tarabam and Cantor were also educators, there's just been so much. There's just been like a prolific educational opportunities. Maybe along with my friend who became a Jew by choice, is to go to the adult bar and bat mitzvah class in the future when we can actually gather. And I think there's just so many, even though I was bat mitzvah when I was 13, I would love to do it again. Maybe you'll do it with us too. And so anyway, I just think there's so many things for everybody.
You know, I have an image when we first joined, and for several years, you would walk into the synagogue, into the sanctuary, and off to the left was a choir box. And, you know, the choir would be there, and they would be wearing white robes, and, you know, there was, they had a major part in the service, and it was very orderly. And now we have a variety of services that go on. They're led by not a, you know, a traditional male rabbi. And as Gilah said about the education, we're really a lot about education, and not just from the professional staff. You know, we have a lot of lay leaders who do things, who lead classes and book groups. And hey, if you want to put together a mahjong group or a men's group or something, well, you know, just let the synagogue know, and it's formed. And it was never like that before. So.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the choir, and I know some old timers remember it fondly. What do you remember about that, and why did it stop, or how that came about?
What do I remember about it? I remember walking, I remember being there, and truth be told, sitting there thinking, you know, this is not appealing to me. Not that I don't like or enjoy others singing or joining in. It was just too formal. It was just too staid. There was no spontaneity. It was a very by rote way to, I can't even say participate, maybe participate. And it was clearly, this is the way we do it. This is the way we're always going to do it. This is what you have to do. And that just wasn't appealing to me. And I think it wasn't a sudden like, oh, we're not going to have a choir anymore. I think that there was some dissatisfaction, and it was certainly not something that Cantor Cone wanted to have happen. And it was gradual over, you know, several years. I think that they were given less and less participation, and there were probably less and less people who wanted to join the choir, and it eventually just stopped. It's my recollection.
Yeah, I think that what we feel about a choir, it feels one thing that I love about Judaism is that you are the conduit to your own God or whatever you believe in. And I think in all other religions, you need a priest or an imam or somebody to have that connection with you. And it's always like a performance. And the choir, it's kind of like a performance, so you're not really involved. And so it feels much less, you know, in these latter years that you're not relying on the clergy to worship. They're helping, maybe guiding or helping you, but they don't have to be there. And the choir feels like a part of just watching somebody else do it. I'd say I do have something negative that's happened in the progression. And I think when we started, there was a bustling gift shop and a bustling sisterhood that did things more for the congregation and less for self like improvement and things that we tend to do now. That it's just like our generationally we've become more like that. And I think that was so special how our sisterhood and Mark's mom, also was very much like that in her synagogue. And those were wonderful times with all these people working together for the betterment of the synagogue. And I don't think that we don't have a gift shop because nobody really wants to do that kind of task. And so I think we've lost a little bit of that.
No, that's
Maybe that's every
important.
place. But
The other
yeah.
program is, what about Chavurot? Were you ever a part of a Chavurah?
No, I think that's real. I think that's a wonderful program. And for some reason, maybe because we had been in a Chavurah before and are still kind of in a Chavurah. Well, no, now 3. We had always had a Chavurah way before there were Chavurot at our synagogue, and we never joined one. And I think that was maybe a mistake, because I think it's a wonderful way to have a more intimate relationship with people at the synagogue. So we started a Shabbat Chavurah, and were we with them a little bit? We did. Was that called the Chavurah?
I think so.
Yeah, maybe we did have a Chavurah for at the very beginning here, but yet somebody left the synagogue, and different things happened, and we just had a very kind of rich Chavurah life that wasn't. Some people in the synagogue were part of it, like the Browns, but there were other people in the community. Yeah, so that's definitely a wonderful program, for sure.
So what are your expectations or your hopes for the future of the CBJ community?
Should we talk about that first or no?
Yeah, you can. Did you hear the question?
Yes, you want to do this first? Okay, do this question. What's my hopes for the CBJ community? Going from strength to strength, I think we're already at a very strong place. I know that throughout the country are complaining about synagogue membership waning. And I don't think that's happening for us, nor for the other peninsula synagogues. It's just a strong group of synagogues that are thriving. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe to be more, if I have a more intimate, maybe it would be the time for a old folks Chavurah. To have it, that might be something to think about for people that aren't in a Chavurah. No, but that's just for us. That's not for the synagogue. You want
maybe some senior housing in the parking lot for us too. I think what I hope for in the future is whatever is working now, which seems to be
a lot.
A lot of things. And I think people feel a sense of community. They feel connected. Everybody feels valued. The approach is, we accept you. We embrace whoever you are, whatever you're interested in, and it's the synagogue is making an effort to be where the members are, as opposed to saying to the members, "This is what we have to offer. You have to fit in, our program." And I think it's so much more Jewish to, reverse that, which we've done, which is, what do you need? What do you want? we're going to communicate with you, whether you like it or not. And I think that that's really a great approach. And I hope we continue that. I hope we continue to be a strong advocate for Israel as well, and encourage our members to continue the trips that we take there for the membership. I think that's really important right now. We actually, in response to the list of questions that you were going to ask us, we came up with something that we both wanted to say, and
A highlight of CBJ.
and I don't know if you were going to get there, but I see that the time is, the sand is about ready to run out.
Go ahead.
We've had the pleasure of, for several decades at this point, of being up on the Bima during Gilah. And at the end, when the Ark is open and the sun is starting to set and the light is streaming in and becoming dimmer and dimmer, and the shades of the people out in the congregation, we get to witness. And in the last several years, people have been invited to come up and, have a private little visit with the Torahs. And that has really been, for us, just such a great sense of community. And it's an appreciation of, our religion. It's an appreciation of being done with the high holidays and what that means. And people come up and we say hello, and it's just been, it's a showing of who Beth Jacob is. And that's been great. And I think everybody who attends that service, and it's at the end of Yom Kippur, not everybody comes back for it, but for those people who do, it's very meaningful for them as well. And so it's been a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that is definitely a highlight. We're so lucky that they let us do that Ark opening every year. And it used to be with our own children, and now our nephew lives in the area and his children come up with us. So that's been just kind of an imprinted jewel of our time there for both of us. It's just so precious because you're there when everybody comes up and everyone's so eager to be in front of the Torot and just to cover themselves with the talit, and their families are together. It's just very, very meaningful. So we feel almost like to be part of that is very, very lucky and memorable for sure.
Yeah, well, that's a wonderful way to kind of come to a close with what has most meaning for you at the synagogue, and a highlight of that time. And it's so wonderful to hear how it comes through you, and knowing how much you have given, that really exemplifies what CBJ is as a community. So I thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to include, that you want to add at this point?
No,
Good.
We got to, that was the only thing left, and that was our big highlight.
Yeah, I think it's, well, I'll say one thing. I'm really glad that you're doing this. And you're obviously an expert at asking questions and nodding very nicely and encouraging people. You're just a perfect person for this. And
we're all lucky to have you in all your many roles.
And I thank you for doing this. And I think it's a great idea for the congregation to create this memory. And hopefully in 50 or 60 or 70 years, when they remember, or somebody remembers that this project was done, that people will learn something.
our hope too. We have a great committee working on it, and it's wonderful. It's really very heartwarming and inspiring to hear people's experiences and their feelings about the synagogue community. So thank you so much. It was so important to have both of your experiences, and we look forward to many more in the future.
Yeah, another highlight is hearing your husband blow the shofar at
That's true.
the synagogue. Whenever he gets a chance, will be there.
Yes.
We'll note it.
Take care.
Thank you.
So much.
All right.